I had the chance to talk with them about what strategies do you use? Now, I am not an elite runner, and having recently had a baby, I'm not really a runner right now at all. But I thought when these people are running, I bet they are like hyper aware of everything that's going on in their surroundings. Where are they relative to the competition? What's happening in their peripheral vision? What's going on the side? Who's behind them? Who's in front of them? They probably have this like master sense, this master visual plan at any point in time. And that's what probably makes them elite. So when I started asking them, is that the case? Do you really pay attention to what's in your surroundings, what's behind you, what's on the side? They said no. Like all of them said no. And sometimes when I do that, it's a mistake. It doesn't work for me. So that was surprising. It totally went against my intuition about what they do that likely contributes to their success. What they said instead was that they are hyper-focused. They assume this narrowed focus of attention, almost like a spotlight is shining on a target. Now, when they're running a short distance, that target might literally be the finish line, the line that they're trying to cross. If it's a longer distance, they set sub-goals, like the shorts on the person up ahead that they're trying to beat, or they choose some sort of stable landmark, like a sign that they would pass by. And like a spotlight is shining just on that, or like they have blinders on the sides of their face. That's all they're paying attention to. It's really narrowed scope of attention. And that was a strategy that all of these elite athletes said that they used, and those that were better rather than than slower were ones that used it more. And I thought, oh, that's something we can play with, right? Like they are elite and they are accomplished, but that visual strategy isn't necessarily something that you have to be in the perfect physical condition to be able to adopt. And so I wonder, can that help the rest of us who aren't competing for an Olympic gold and who have no chance of ever getting one, but who want to exercise better, have a better time doing it, and maintain a commitment to that exercise goal that they might otherwise, by February or March be giving up on if they had set it at the beginning of January. So that's really where the work started, was, what you might call like focus groups or case studies of these incredible athletes. And then we did other studies looking at, people who aren't Olympic athletes, but who are competitive New York road runners, and how are they running in races. And what we found is that those people who have better pace, faster pace, better time, they use that narrowed strategy more often than this more expansive or, open scope of attention. And there seemed to be a correlation between that better performance among a wider swath of hundreds of runners who are doing it competitively, but still, could be like the person that you're sitting next to in the office or yourself, right? And the more often that they did it, the more consistently they had adopted that technique of the narrowed focus of attention, it seemed that they were doing better in their runs. So then we started thinking like, okay, what about people who aren't competitive runners? What about like my mom? Can she do that? Or me when I'm trying to get back on the bandwagon and exercise more? Is this a tactic we can teach people? The answer is yes. You can tell people about what these Olympic athletes are doing. You can tell them about what the New York road runners are doing. And just using the same language that I just used with you, right? Imagine that there's a spotlight shining just on a target. Choose something up ahead, the stop sign 2 blocks up that you can just see. And imagine that you have blinders on so that you're not really paying attention to the people that are passing by, or the buildings, or the garbage cans, or the trucks that are on the road. Tune those out and focus in on that target until you hit it, and then choose another one, right? Sort of recalibrate, choose the next goal. And so we would test, like, can people do that? I mean, if you're listening right now, you probably are imagining that experience too. And the answer is yes. Like, I can imagine that. I know what those words mean, and I can do that. And our work found that too. If people can do that, we have them say out loud, what is it that's captured your attention? And of course, sometimes something in the periphery, like movement, captures our gaze and are pulled there for an instant, but then we can refocus up again and adopt that narrowed attention. Now, one of the first studies that we did was teach that strategy and juxtapose or compare it against a group that we said, just look around naturally. You might see that finish line up ahead and there's things on the periphery. Whatever your eyes want to do, whatever you think is going to work best, feel free to do that and tell us what you're looking at. Then we gave them a finish line. We created sort of, an exercise that's moderately challenging, but possible. We put ankle weights on that accounted for about 15% of their body weight, told them to lift their knees up, sort of high stepping to a finish line. So this would be challenging for them to do. But we said, it's an indicator of overall health and fitness. Some of these people had narrowed their focus of attention, and some were just looking more expansively or naturally. And what we found is that those people that we trained, just everyday normal people doing this moderately challenging exercise, they were able to move 27% faster. They could do the exercise more quickly, and they said it hurt 17% less. The exercise was exactly the same for all the people. We set the weight, we set the distance. It was in our lab space, so it was a constrained environment. Everybody was in the same sort of circumstance, but yet their experience was really different. We helped them to move faster, burn calories at a higher rate, right? Exercise more efficiently. The amount of time they put in is going to produce a better physical outcome. And it didn't hurt them, right? They're saying it doesn't hurt as much. So we were really excited about that, right? Because it meant that this strategy, we could use it on people who are not elite athletes. It could be easily adopted. A quick training session, right, can teach people to look at the world in a different way. Again, this narrowed attention was different than whatever they do naturally, the comparison group, but it had a big outcome. It had a big difference on the way that they were engaged in the exercise. That was some of the first work that we did. And then since then, we've done, dozens more studies to look at, what happens with that and what else can we do with playing around with this? Yeah. So, those Olympic athletes that we started by interviewing, they tended to be sprinters. They were more often sprinters, short distance sprinters. So when they said yes, I narrow in more than I assume an expansive focus, that's because they're not going that far, right? They have to do it as fast as humanly possible, but they're not going that far. And so we started asking that question too about wouldn't that be tiring? And the answer is yes. So when we start to look at, people who aren't sprinters, who are accomplished, but who are more long distance runners, that's what we find that they do, is that they, they're using that narrowed attention strategy strategically, and it increases in use. They use it more often as the race progresses. And they really start to do this, major switch about the halfway point of, say, a 10-kilometer run. So people who are seasoned runners, they really start making a switch with what they're looking at about halfway through. And that's where they more often, more frequently, and are more intentionally adopting a narrowed focus of attention when they're in the last couple miles of a run, when maybe their resources are starting to get more thin, maybe their motivation is starting to fade. That tipping point in the middle is with any kind of goal where people struggle the most. And that's when they're doubling down on a strategy that they know to be effective. So, at first, longer distance runners are not using that narrowed strategy. They're looking more expansively because I think that first of all, distraction is a thing. It's useful. Not necessarily that they're distracting themselves, because people are still trying to hold pace and jostle among probably a more concentrated group of runners. But it is a strategy that they use and then sort of wean off of as the race goes through. And it's particularly effective when we're looking for that last push, right? The last push to get over the finish line, when you might be literally neck and neck with somebody that you're trying to just beat out, or when you're most tired, but that last push, you don't want to drop off. And you want to push through hard through that finish line. That's when people are using it at its peak level of intensity.
I see.